and welcome to the Mindset Rx'd podcast. My name is Tom Foxley and I help functional athletes gain a champ's mindset, as does the whole of Mindset Rx'd actually, because it's quickly becoming an entity larger than myself. Now, before I get into today's show, I just want to, before I even get into the prelude to today's show, I'm drinking a cup of magnificent coffee, and this isn't a sponsored plug or anything like that. It's just because I really enjoy their coffee, and any of you who've been following this show for more than 5 minutes will know how much I adore coffee. I mentioned it in the last one, but I think it's worth an extra shout out. That's a Crank House Coffee in I think they're in Exeter in the UK, but it's magnificent coffee. Found them at the London Coffee Festival, and it's a really great place. But the actual prelude to this is there's going to be a variety of seminars heading into the UK, the US, and the rest of Europe for the rest of the year. And if you're interested in hosting a seminar, I'd love you to head to mindsetrx'd.com/host. So that's mindsetrx'd.com/host, and you shall find a little form there which you can what's the right word? Submit. There we go. Submit. You can submit that form, and we can go from there. And then the lovely, brilliant Tamara will be in contact with you, and she'll sort everything out. So if you'd like to host a Mindset Rx seminar where I'll be coming and talking to you, your athletes maybe, about everything mindset and how it transfers to not only their performance but their wider life too, then I'd love to do that. Just go to mindsetrx.com/host. Now, today's podcast comes from not really a dilemma, but the irony of the fact that I'm the mindset coach for CrossFit athletes, and I've got a CrossFit competition tomorrow and a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition in 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, and I still find myself falling into the same traps. Not because I am a bad human being by any point, or not because I'm not because I'm bad at mindset, but simply because it's a natural thing to begin to fall into these traps. And it's an awareness that we need that's going to pull us out of it. We have to become hyper aware of our language, of what we're doing from a moment to moment basis in order to pull ourselves out of this. So whilst in previous years this would have consumed me for months before the event, I just find it as a kind of a tickling under the surface. Something in the back of my mind is going, oh, Tom, don't forget you got that competition. And it's actually really interesting because I've been able to watch the same things that happen to my athletes, and try and remind myself of exactly the same things that I teach them. So where do we start with this? We start with probably the most important one, especially for those of you that are competitive. The first mistake that people make and athletes make when coming up to a competition is attaching to the outcome. They attach to the outcome of winning. They attach to the outcome of finishing every workout. They attach to the outcome of coming out of there injury-free. And whilst these are all things that we'd like to pursue, they are completely out of our control. They are focused exclusively on a destination as opposed to the outcome. As a destination as opposed to the journey. And the issue with this is, firstly, if we fail, we feel shit about ourselves and we don't do it again. We don't sign up, and our self-worth comes really crashing down. And secondly, it doesn't help us perform because we're not focused on what's important in the moment, which is our effort. So a lot of people will focus on the winning and the outcome in that regard, but instead try focusing on the effort that you're putting into the moment. That's a huge change. Like, all you can control is that, and it leads on to the second point, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But it applies to when we talk about PRs too. We attach to PR, we attach to a 100 kilo snatch, like I've spoken about before. This is my big hurdle that I was attached to for so long. We attach to Fran PRs, we attach to 5K PRs, we attach to like that destination again. But instead, if we're going to snatch a bar, let's focus on the setup. Am I doing the setup perfectly? And then we begin to focus on the process. We focus on what's controllable again, which leads me into the second mistake that functional athletes make, CrossFit athletes in a whisper behind CrossFit HQ's legal department's back. The second mistake that they make is they focus on the uncontrollable factors on the day. So this is a big one that's kind of, I found nagging away at me, and it's really interesting to see it come up. The things that come up for me in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition in particular is, I don't know who I'm fighting. It could be anyone. They could have, they're unlikely to be that much bigger than me, but they could be someone that deserves a blue belt, someone that deserves a purple belt, even like two ranks higher, but is still at a white belt because they've just started. They could be someone sneaking into competition. They could just be better athletes than me. Everyone there, the first person that I fight could be a better athlete than me. So this is a completely uncontrollable factor, and I still found myself being drawn towards it because it's a human temptation, and that's absolutely fine. Other things that kind of that can get you, the weather, like the competition that we're doing tomorrow is at the Summer Social in London, and it could be boiling hot. It's likely to be hot and humid, whatever the weather is, but we've had some amazing thunderstorms here recently, and those kind of thunderstorms, if it's pouring down with rain, that does not sound like a fun day for most people. Ironically, it's probably where I would do best, but we can see how a lot of people would be affected by that. Just if it's raining and miserable, some people would really suffer through that, and nerves as well. We want to fight off nerves. We want to kind of hold on to them and kind of control them, but we can't control them unless we learn to allow them to run rampage, which is a really weird thought. And that's where most people go wrong with pre-competition nerves, by the way. They think they have to try and control them, when in fact you just have to view them and accept them. And that's the way to kind of to get over them in a nutshell, without going into too many specific tactics there. Instead of focusing on those uncontrollable factors, it's very simple. We focus on the controllable factors. So hydration, sleep, and ultimately your effort. Like the effort is the big one, and this is where our self-worth really comes into play. Like if you're focused on your effort and you give 100% effort, you can give yourself a pat on the back. If you gave more effort than you did the previous time you had a competition, again, you can give yourself a huge pat on the back, because, well, progress over perfection and all that kind of shit. The third mistake, and this is going to sound funny coming from a mindset coach, but the third mistake athletes make is visualizing. And it's not visualizing per se that's the problem, it's the way that they're doing it. Again, we focus only on the success. We focus on the snatch PR. We focus on the standing on top of the podium, celebrating. And that is only perfection. We only visualize the perfect outcome. Whereas I can guarantee only one thing about tomorrow, that something won't go to plan. Something won't be exactly how I want it to plan out. So if I'm visualizing only for perfection, when it doesn't go right, what am I going to do? I'm going to fluster, I'm going to flap. And it's exactly the same in my jiu-jitsu competition. I can plan the perfect the perfect takedown to knee on belly to like whatever. I can plan through those movements, and I can go through it, and I can visualize myself snapping on a perfect armbar with the best technique. But I know that especially with fights, things get a lot more messy than they should be. So trying to control those trying to visualize those perfect outcomes is flawed for that very reason. So the point here, ask yourself, what will I do if? What will I do if my judge doesn't call the right score? What will I do if someone gets on my equipment? What will I do if I'm sleep deprived and dehydrated and all this kind of stuff? And then and only then we can realize I'll stay in control. I'll control my emotions, because back to that second point, that's all we can do. We can only control the controllables. We can only control our input, and you can't control the output at all. The fourth mistake, and this is a big one, just in terms of as we mature, this generally becomes less until we enter a competition, and then we come back to the same old mistakes. It's like being at school again. Well, it is for me anyway. But the fourth mistake we make is disorganization. We just kind of leave it to a whim, and like we kind of turn up and we're like, oh shit, I haven't got enough trainers, and I haven't got enough water, and I haven't got enough spare changes of clothes, and I haven't got this and I haven't got that. And that's a huge thing. Like, what you bring on, what's your kit list? So ask yourself two questions. What will I definitely need? What may I need? And there's an important point here as well. There's a phrase in the military, it's especially big in the US military, but it's come across to the UK as well, of one is none, two is one. In as much as if you have one piece of kit and it breaks, you have 0 pieces of kit and you can't do your job. Whereas if you have 2 pieces of kit and one breaks, you've still got 1. So 2 is better than 1 in that regard. So get organized with this shit. And then just simple stuff like, I know like this sounds like I'm parenting you, but how are you going to get there? Make sure you get there with plenty of time, because if you get there with 15 minutes to spare, like you've got plenty of time to just sit there, chill before you need to be, and you can kind of relax. And that's a massive controllable factor. You can control when you leave, when you get there, all that kind of stuff. And the 5th point here, and the 5th mistake that functional athletes make in competition and before competition, by the way, you'll notice a lot of these are before competition, because we can't really do much when we're in competition. Trying to flip your language for the first time in competition, you're doomed to failure. But the 5th mistake is at odds, is the other end of that disorganization. It's overthinking, it's over controlling, it's simply our bound nature. If you've heard me talk about bound nature before, bound nature is simply when you're not being the person you desire to be, when you're not being you, when you're not being kind of that person that is just free and easy. When anything other than that, that's bound nature. And overthinking is a massive part of that. So if you're thinking, oh my God, I've got to do this, and then I've got to do that, and then I've got all these things going around in my head for competition day, and I should be like, what if so-and-so is watching? What if they're not watching? All this kind of shit. We quite often overthink. Our job here is to get into free nature, where we don't have anything to think about, when our mind switches off. And the best way to do this is simply just note that, this is bound nature. This isn't who I am. This isn't who I am. And all I have to do is take a step back from here. And again, it comes back to control the controllables. You can't really control what is, like, whether you're in bound nature or not, until you see it clearly. So if you're in bound nature, don't freak out about it. If you're overthinking, don't freak out about it. Just see it clearly. And finally, my last point is just enjoy it. Like, it's a competition. It's not the end of the world. Just hopefully you've got some sort of core values that you live by in life, whether that's written down or kind of a more conceptual thing in your mind. If you can live by those, you're sorted. So any questions, as always, and for some reason on Fridays this always used to be the case, like I've had to not cut this short but rush through them, because I've got another call with my inner athlete performance camp, so I've got to rush off. But if you got any questions, you can send them to, probably Instagram is the best place, which is at Tom Foxley, or you can find me on the socials, or find Mindset Rx'd on the socials at facebook.com/Mindset Rx'd, or you can go to www.mindsetrx'd.com, so that's Mindset Rx'd, and I shall speak to you all very soon. Oh, and don't forget to leave a 5-star review and all that kind of jazz on iTunes.